What if I told you that there is a crisis like never seen before in Russia? The crisis much worse than the current fuel crisis, worse than Russian economy collapsing, worse than the war going on. And it's not somewhere close, it's not around the corner, it's not waiting to happen. The crisis is happening right now already, and it's being silenced by the Russian government. This is bigger than anything you've heard so far. Howdy, howdy, friends. My name is Konstantin. Welcome to Inside Russia, where usual Russia is explained by the unusual Russian. I am Russian by birth, analyst by choice. I lived it, I studied, and I report it. I make Russia make sense. No BS, propaganda, or lies here, just truth, common sense, and logic. And some emotions too, because I am living the tragedy of my country. Welcome to Fridays, TGIF. I give you crazy news update straight out of the mad circus that Russia has unfortunately become. But first things first, there is no such absurdity that could not be realized in Russia these days. Please remember that. In the news, I call them crazy news from Russia. The news of Russia that matter, and most of them you will not find in any mainstream media. Now, without further ado, let's jump straight to the news. And let me start with the positive news. I love positive news. You know, I've said many times before, for poor positive news in the beginning, they kind of set the mood for the entire message. So I give you positive news from Russia. Actually, quite a few I have today. And the first positive news today is that Russian people will live healthy. And I mean mentally healthy and physically healthy. They're going to be all right. Um, let's face it, there are troubles in this world, okay? We all know that. And there are some people who to be perfectly honest, there's a lot of people who believe that all troubles in life come from this thing right here. Do you know what it is? Yes, this is a mobile tower, and this is 5G. Now, um, 5G towers are actually numerous in Russia, and plenty of them. I even made a live stream about them. 5G internet was being implemented in my country. Well, a lot of people who think that all evil comes from 5G, all COVID came from 5G, and all that stuff like that. Uh, well, we should rejoice because there will be no 5G anymore. Russian people are going to be free from all that sickness, all that mind washing, brainwashing that comes from 5G towers. Okay? Um, all that stuff, the Russians don't need tinfoil hats any longer because they're shutting down um, most of the 5G towers. Not to the drones, not to anything else. It's because Russian government thinks that 5G in Russia is not needed any longer. Um, Now all these good folks on the internet who are sure that all the problems come from 5G, um, finally everyone rejoices because this is what is happening. All the auctions, 5G auctions frequencies, have been canceled. because they're not needed any longer by the mobile operators. Everyone is skeptical. Everyone, I think, starts understanding Russia. Yeah, there are problems from 5G. We should spare good Russian folks from 5G. So regular Russians are jubilant all over the country. It looks like Russia is the first country in the world where they downgrade mobile infrastructure from 5G first to 4G and then to 3G. And after that, the next step, the future, to no G at all. That's the roadmap of their strategic plan, 3G Russia. You see, other countries are trying to upgrade their mobile infrastructure to make internet speed faster, to make the signal clearer. Not Russia. It doesn't. Free Russia of G. How about that? Russians are going to be healthy now. They're going to be wealthy because all the problems here in the heads from 5G. No one is going to influence minds of Russian people any longer. Not those Americans. Of course, it's them through 5G. The British, the Americans, the evil West. Now, Russians can take off their tinfoils, forget about them. Celebrate good time. Come on, no 5G in Russia. Not bad. Now, please forgive me my sarcasm. It's the only way I try to cope with all the stress and tragedy of these messages because they're far from, upbeat and positive. Okay? It's not easy for me to see my country falling apart in front of my eyes. So please forgive my sarcasm. Now, another positive piece of news right after 5G, right there for you. Imagine this positive effect of eradicating 5G will have on Russian people. But that's not all. Russian government takes it one step further. On top of making the citizens of Russia healthy, no 5G any longer, the government wants to make them safer. Because right now, not safe. Well, cybercrime is rampant in Russia. The scammers, the fraudsters who sit outside Russia and scam good Russian people out of their savings, that's bad. And they're all not in Russia. They all are abroad, okay? They're foreigners. They scam good citizens, and that must stop. But Russian law enforcement just can't do much about it. They can't get them sitting in America, in the foreign lands. They gotta be in America. I mean, where else can they be, right? Where else can they operate their scams from? America, it's the land of blue jeans, Coca-Cola, and computers and bubblegum. And that all is the root of evil. Of course. Of course. Oh boy. I, all that Coca-Cola, all the blue jeans, I gotta tell you a secret. That all leads to Satanism. And that's what Americans have become. By the way, that's after this fallout with Donald Trump and after this new sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil that were placed 2 days ago. That's the official stand of Russian propaganda. All them Americans, they're Satanists. Again, 2 weeks ago they were all right, but now they're back to Satanism. So anyway, um, fraud must be stopped. Okay, fraud coming out of America must be stopped, and Russian secret police (KGB) has already started working on stopping these bad fraudsters. Now, how do they perform their fraud? Of course, by calling good Russian citizens and by scamming them and to giving their bank accounts and all of that. And I think the Russians are not the only ones. A lot of people in the world fall victims to the scams right now, these days. Well, but how to stop them? Do you know? Well, I don't, but the Russian government does, very much so. They know how to stop. Of course, they've got to cut means of communication for Russian people. So no one calls them from abroad. How do you do that? Well, first of all, in the past, Russian government already took steps. They banned calls, calls on very popular messengers called Telegram and WhatsApp. So if you're in Russia and if you don't use VPN, most Russians don't, then you cannot place calls. You must use your mobile call. Okay, so a mobile network, and they cannot call mobile phones from abroad any longer for the reason Russian citizens' safety. But now Russian government um, takes it one step forward. Okay, they want to ban Russians to receive telephone calls on landlines, on regular telephones. Why? For their own safety, of course. The fraudsters now gonna be calling them on the regular phone. Oh boy, that must be really really safe. Um, now, have I told you about Max Messenger? The only messenger available for calls inside Russia right now is Max, the mobile app that takes control over entire mobile phone and sends all the information straight to the KGB because it's designed by the KGB. Okay, so they banned everything else, and they only have Max available left. Um, Now they have blocked mobile international calls, and now they're trying to block landline international calls. This is, in my eyes, is called digital iron curtain, and it's descending very, very fast. Okay, um, Russian Senator Sergei Boyarsky, the chairman of Parliament's Committee on Information Policy, said that uh, landlines, landline calls from other countries to telephone numbers of Russian citizens must be banned. Okay, that's big deal. That's the chairman of uh, one of the committees of Russian Parliament. Now, that's good enough. I mean, is there any proof that fraudsters use regular telephones? No, of course not. Do you want proof? Isn't that good enough what Russian senator said? In Russia, of course, we trust Russian senators. They never lie, them good senators. So, good Senator Boyarsky believes that it is necessary to ban international calls. No joke, right here. According to the senator, disconnection should become mandatory by default. It might be possible to connect receiving calls from abroad, but only at the special request of telephone service subscriber. Turn it off, Boyarsky says, and he is a heavyweight senator, so most likely they will turn it off. Most major propaganda media picked up the story, and I just showed you RIA Novosti. Um, I think it's a great measure. It'll be definitely safer for people. And I actually saw exactly that measure was implemented in the USSR when I was growing up. No inbound international calls to Soviet citizens, only at special request of the authorities. If you were expecting a telephone call, you had to notify the KGB in advance so they could listen. kind of convenient for them, And it actually worked. They weren't any foreign scammers and fraudsters back then in the USSR. Zero. Zilch. None. Well, we had nothing to be scammed off in those times. Soviet state made sure of that. It scammed us first. But it doesn't really matter. No fraud then, and there will be no fraud now. When they cut off all means of communication between Russian people, except for the KGB messenger. I have one question though. Who in the world, who in Russia, still has telephone landlines? I haven't seen any in a very, very long time. This is crazy. Great measure. Now I'm going to tell you a secret, so don't tell anyone. Most fraudsters and scammers, and they do exist, and they scam a lot of Russian people, especially older folks who are, don't really understand how this system of smartphones and bank accounts and safety codes work. So there are plenty of fraudsters, but they're not foreigners. They don't sit in foreign lands. There's a place that everyone knows where they are at in Russia. Whisper to you, absolute majority of telephone scammers are located inside Russian prisons. Imprisoned criminals work for those who guard them. It's a big mafia, and it's a taboo topic in Russia. But just don't tell anyone, okay? Don't tell them I told you. The next news is beyond positive. It's positively a breakthrough. Russia is finally getting back on technological track. Russia is back to the top of the world again with new, very authentic technology. And it is called no less than physical artificial intelligence for robots. And it's being developed in Russia exclusively. Nowhere else in the world they're developing this stuff. This is good. Physical AI, it's called. Physical AI will enable robots to understand the contexts of surrounding world and act depending on the situation. I want you to check this out. This is the new technology. This is being developed by a company called Yandex. And I want you to see that again, please. This is marvelous. You've never seen anything like this before in your life. This is just grand. This AI is being developed by Russians for service and industrial robots, robo-arms, autonomous transportation, and humanoids. Whatever it is. Among the developments is the VLA model. In other words, vision, language, action model. And this is grand. It actually, through this model, these robots can take commands that human beings give by voice. And this is another breakthrough. No one has done that ever before. Only Russians. I am very impressed, really. I think this is just fantastic. Voice-operated robots. They take command. Now, I'm trying hard not to laugh, so you gotta understand. This VLA model is being developed for, to give different commands. And this is like the breakthrough. No one has ever done that. And I'm thinking, well, I have an iPhone, right? Siri has been available on this iPhone for, I don't know, like 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, and I never use Siri, but I can give Siri, I can say something, and Siri does it. Okay, and then it does it pretty darn well. And there's Alexa, and there are other services, and they've been working for the ChatGPT uses the same service, and Yandex says they're designing gestures as absolutely new breakthrough feature. Gestures. I know that BMW cars use gestures for commands for like forever, okay? And all this robo arms, the Japanese have been using them since late 80s. I think someone inside Russia is a little cuckoo. They're saying, for example, we're gonna use this voice commands to for robo arms to pick up an object, carry it, put it down, and so on. If you look at any modern manufacturer of cars, you will see like hundreds of robots doing exactly that, and they do it brilliantly with like perfect precision. But Yandex Robotics, it's a new company. Yandex, please forgive me. Yandex robotics engineers plan to integrate this technology into robot arms as well as other services and industrial robots. Fantastic news indeed. Very fresh, very innovative, very innovative. Um, I was thinking, and I come up with this idea, a suggestion for Russian people. Now, it's free of charge. It's something that you should work on if you're watching me from Russia right now. Now, I have a suggestion to all Russians. Why don't you try to invent another breakthrough fresh technology? Telephone. How about that? Yeah, that's going to be another breakthrough in line with what I just showed you. Now, enough of good news. The next piece of news is actually so crazy. It's real crazy. Not really positive. I even failed to add sarcasm to it. I couldn't. Most Russians are ready for self-restraint for the sake of country's security. More than two-thirds of Russians surveyed feel responsible for their country and are willing to limit their needs in order to protect it. This follows from the All Russian survey conducted by FTSIOM, that's analytical center. It's a very fresh survey. It was done on October 15th. The survey was ordered by the Expert Institute on Social Research, funded by the Russian government. According to the survey, 69% of respondents reported their willingness to self restrain their personal requirements for the sake of protecting the state. Wow. 24% disagreed with such prospect. Now, again, just think of these numbers, friends. They are shocking. 69%. 69. In addition, 80% of respondents stated they generally trust the Russian army and are so proud of country's military might that after 3.5 years, the Russian army has regained its credibility in the eyes of the society. It's stated by FTSIOM's CEO Valery Fedorov. The failures of 2022 and 2023 are in the past, and Ukraine's rejection of a fair peace strengthens the Russians' determination to continue military operations until the fulfillment of all the goals of the special military operation. I just quoted the CEO of Tzium. The economic difficulties of recent years so far, people are meeting with understanding and declaring their readiness for some self restraint in order to successfully aid the state. You know what, friends? I believe it. I believe it. And it is very sad. It makes my heart bleed. And that's exactly why I left Russia. I don't want to live among people who think so. I hear of exactly the same opinion a lot lately. And they come from Russia. These opinions come from all kinds of people in Russia, from different walks of life. These numbers are the result of super efficient, best in the world propaganda. Russian propaganda brainwashing citizens. You know, when the war broke out, when Russia invaded Ukraine, at least people started asking questions. Now, all those questions have been answered by the propaganda in a way that is simply evil. How can you be proud of Russian army, of what it has done? How can you, in 3 years, it hasn't moved anywhere, okay? If we just take that fact alone, it's stuck. It cannot advance into Ukraine, and Russians are sold this idea that Ukraine is very has very weak army, it's falling, and all of these problems. And yet, Russian army cannot push further. And all those Russian men dead or maimed. And Russians are proud of that. They are ready to self restrain their personal requirements to aid the state. For what? So more Ukrainians are killed, so more Russians are killed. This is this is very sad news. You know, I keep standing my ground. I say that peace is only possible when Russian people, not the government, but people, regular people, just the ones featured in that FTSIOM survey, regular people will realize the tragedy they have caused. Regular people take full responsibility and repent. Only then there will be peace. So keep on watching those poll numbers because numbers speak louder than words. This is one of the saddest news I've seen in the last months, and it shows that where Russian people are standing right now. The next piece of news is food for thought. The spiritual administration of Muslims of Russia. Now, you have heard of this organization. I've featured it a couple times in my this crazy Friday news updates. This organization is proposed to be recognized as a foreign agent, and that's quite a turn. Well, now, what the hell is this news about? First of all, what is this thing, the spiritual administration of Muslims of Russia, in the first place? Why is it so important? The spiritual administration of Muslims, often called Muftiyat, is a state registered religious body that oversees Islamic life for parts of Russia's Muslim community. It coordinates mosques and clergy, issues fatwas, manages Islamic education, manages halal certifications, manages Hajj logistics. Those Muslim Russians who want to travel, do Hajj to Mecca, and it represents Muslims to the government. So this is a pretty big deal organization. In nutshell, it is a Muslim religious organization that influences the minds of Russia's Muslims. For example, this organization publicly allowed Muslim men to have more than one wife in Russia, which is strictly illegal by some Russian federal laws and completely against constitution of Russia. But the Muslim directorate, they decided that they can override Russian federal laws and Russian constitution, and they have allowed. This is the screenshot of Kommersant newspaper from December of 2024 last year, and it was featured in my reports. This is what kind of organization that is. And then a few days ago, this spiritual administration of Muslims made another announcement, officially forbidding Muslim men working as delivery to deliver non-halal products such as pork, cigarettes, and alcohol. That a wonderful organization that is. No. And the Russian Orthodox Church, Eastern Orthodox Church, strikes back at this Muslim organization. And this is what was aired on Russian national TV. The journalist Roman Antonovsky notes that the fragmented muftiats often promote open radicalism. I quote, "We do not have a single Muslim authority like we have in the Russian church. We have a bunch of different muftiats. The problem with the spiritual administration of Muslims of Russia ranks fifth or sixth in popularity. That is, they are unpopular among indigenous Muslims. They see their flock among migrants and they lobby for allowing more migrants to move to Russia." And then the political scientist Alexei Kochetkov, on the screen featured right now, he believes that the spiritual administration of Muslims of Russia should be recognized as foreign agent. I quote, "There is plenty of evidence that is tied to Turkish and Qatari money. We know very well that Qatar is generally a sponsor of and significant part of global terrorism. And Turkey has its geopolitical interests. And the spiritual administration of Muslims of Russia invites prosecution, or at least deserves the status of foreign agent. A structure officially receiving money from abroad, moreover, not from friendly countries for some of its own purposes, should be recognized as foreign agent." Now, why did I select this particular news for you? To me, it shows a great conflict inside Russian government, well, Russian society, really. The conflict between the religious groups. What we're seeing is just a few small signs of a bigger game. Those religious bulldogs under the carpet, they're fighting, and these programs, interviews, accusations, fatwas, or whatever the statements that this Muslim organization does, that's just small signs of a huge political fight for power. And where there's a religious fight, it's usually fight until death. To me, this news is a sign that political control in Russia starts slipping from Putin's hands. It's nothing major, but it's there. It's there for us to see. And this is one of the topics that we should monitor, and you better believe me, I will be monitoring very closely this. I find it extremely important. Now, friends, if you are enjoying this message so far, please hit the like button right now and subscribe if you aren't subscribed yet. It helps me a lot. Also, after this message is over, please leave a comment sharing what you think. And if you have nothing to share, it happens to the best of us. Sometimes it happens to me too when I watch other videos or live streams. Well, then just tell us which part of the world you are watching Inside Russia from, or leave an encouraging sentence, something like, "Konstantin, you're doing a great job, thank you." It's very pleasant for me to read such words. I Don't reply to all the comments. There are thousands of them. But I certainly do look through them. And a coffee would be great too. I love English tea and coffee. So thank you very much, friends. Hit the like button right now and subscribe. The next piece of news comes from the town of Bale. It's in Transbaikal province of Russia. It's eastern part of Russia, where in a local school, the ceiling in a classroom, one of the classrooms, collapsed right during a lesson. Right here. This is the result. And this picture I'm showing you right now is an official picture from the state prosecutor's office, local office. They took the picture, placed it on their website. The teacher managed to evacuate 8 children, and no one was hurt, thank goodness. And judging by this published, again, let me continue showing, judging by this published footage, several large chunks of plaster from the ceiling fell onto the desks. Well, just another old school in Russia, some might say, it's just in poor shape. No! A complete renovation in this particular school, in this particular classroom, was carried out 2 years ago, in 2023. Millions of rubles, hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent renovating this school. It should be brand new. Now, do you think they did a good job? Do you think they really spent all that money on schools, on doing the renovation? Because I don't think so. I think that the money was stolen. And this is exactly what happens in Putin's Russia. This is the vertical of power Vladimir Putin has built over 25 years. It's aimed at providing the control over Russian people and enriching those who have the power, who have the control. And you're looking at this right now. Brand new, renovated classroom. Well, friends, what can I say? This is Putin's Russia 2025. This is kind of expected. Another school just fell apart in Novosibirsk province a few weeks ago when I showed it in my Friday news update. Today's school, well, a part of it fell apart. And there's going to be a lot of accidents like that. Because this system, and that's what I'm trying to make you understand, this Putin's Russia, it's not aimed at everything run well goal. Okay, it's not aimed at making people's lives better. It's aimed at money and power. And that is absolutely it. There is nothing else there. Putin's Russia 2025. The next piece of news is directly from Russian Tsar, Vladimir Putin. You know, I've got to give it to Putin. He is consistent. Well, most of the times at least. Last week, Vladimir Putin met with one of the governors of Russia And they both spoke on brainwashing Russians into having more children. The governor said that the propaganda is the best way to make Russians have more children, and Vladimir Putin openly agreed. So, yeah, of course, yeah, it was in the previous Friday news update, and if you watched it, you must remember that was a very, very emotional moment. So they are openly saying that propaganda is the best, cheapest, and most efficient way to make Russians do anything. And this is another meeting on this topic of demography that I'm going to show you right now. Putin suggested considering new ways to persuade Russian women to have children. The idea of creating maternity capital program in the past was once very successful, but now it is necessary to think about improving this mechanism, Putin said. Among other measures effective for improving the demographic situation, Vladimir Putin named increasing the number of indigenous people living in Russia and developing programs to return Russian speaking ethnic Russians living abroad to Russia and those who have fled Russia recently, like myself and the others at Tashkent Breakfast Club. Addressing Russians, Putin urged them not to postpone childbirth and have children while young. And at the same time, the president emphasized that the decision to have a child should be a private, personal matter of the future parents made without external pressure. You see, Vladimir Putin is very consistent. He talked about propaganda being best way to promote demography in Russia. He agreed with the governor. They openly talked about it. It was televised and they show it to Russian people. That's how I knew. I showed it to you in turn. So it was last week. And this week, he actually preaches what he said last week. He propagates. And that is, my friends, consistency. The next news, well, despite being pressured by it's personal news, really, it's a promise. Despite being pressured by the Russian government, followed by the secret police KGB, demonetized by Google, I am still here. Shaken but not broken. I am still breathing. I will go on, and you have my promise on that. Thank you very much for your precious time, for support, for liking, commenting, subscribing, for your prayers and love. Thank you for coffees. You buy me at buymeacoffee.com, for PayPal and Patreon. The support is much, much appreciated. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. And the next news, well, it's become like a regular part of Friday reports or weekend reports. The arrests, more arrests. Now, it's one of those things in Russia happening right now. Every week brings more and more arrests. We can simply say more arrests happen in Russia, or we can describe it with more adjectives, something in a very poetic way. Let's say the spiders are in the jar finally devouring each other, and that's exactly what's happening. So, arrest number one, the chief designer of the Soyuz military plant was arrested in absentia. Well, he's a lucky one who managed to escape before his arrest. The chairman of the Scientific and Technical Council of the Aircraft Engine Scientific and Technical Complex called Soyuz, it's really a plant, a research organization. Mkrtich Akrayan was sent to prison in absentia on suspicion of large-scale fraud. Now, this guy right here, he is wanted. There is federal search for him, nationwide search. Sharp looking guy. He seems well taken care of, well dressed, well maintained, so to speak. You know, he looks very confident. Now, the Soyuz plant is listed as a defense enterprise, and Akrayan was found owning foreign assets in 2023, bank accounts, and real estate in London and some other European countries. Him and his wife turned out to be permanent residents of the UK. Not too shabby, you know? And this is, again, that's another example of how Putin's Russia works. They steal in Russia, but they don't want to live in Russia because they don't like it. They don't feel protected. They don't think it's good enough for them. The KGB can seize their money and steal everything. They can be thrown in prison. So they prefer to steal in Russia and transfer everything to other countries. It could be the USA, could be France, could be the UK, could be Dubai, could be, I don't know, you name it. The offshore zones such as the Cyprus, British Virgin Islands, and so forth. And that's it. They don't want to do anything with Russia any longer. Steal and run. That's quite a strategy. But not everyone can do that. Not this guy, not Ramil Shaidulin, the CEO of Avtodoors, subsidiary construction company. He was sent to prison on a charge of embezzlement on a large scale. Shaidulin faces up to 10 years in prison. Now, what is this guy about? He is the head of one of the companies that is a part of Avtodor Group, Avtodor Corporation. It's a state owned Russian highway corporation. It builds and maintains all roads in Russia, well, all major roads. Avtodor IC was founded in 2020, so it's fairly fresh company. The first project was the construction of the seventh stage of the M12 Vostok Expressway. In 2024, Vladimir Putin awarded this guy, Ramil Shaidulin, the title of Honored Builder of Russia for the construction of this highway, expressway, and for many years of great work. And in late 2025, Shaidulin was arrested for exactly the same Putin awarded him last year. That's today's Russia for you. Another arrest. Alexei Shevtsov, well, he was the head of the town of Plos in the central Russia in Ivanovo province in 2010 and 2011. He was a councilman during the period from 2005 to 2015 for quite some time. The court seized nearly 150 real estate properties and 304 million rubles. Obviously, this guy was arrested. So he was milked of an equivalent of $4 million in cash and 150 facilities of different kinds. Now, that's the former mayor of Plos. Plos is a very small town in the center of Russia. 150 real estate properties. Folks, what is the matter with them? They get busted owning hundreds of properties. Former Vladivostok mayor recently 820 apartments and other pieces of property seized. All were in his name. A former Supreme Court judge in one of the provinces in the south of Russia with 300 properties and $150 million in cash and in bank accounts. Former mayor of a small town and $1.5 million in cash and 12 kilos of gold on him running away from the police. Now, am I the only one finding this extremely crazy. Yeah, please let me know in the comments. You know what? I don't call these news crazy for nothing. Oh, no. The next news is real quick. It's about the condition of some Russian transport supplied to the army at the front lines. Putin and his ministers regularly claim that the army is provided with everything necessary. Well, some pictures tell stories better than Putin and his ministers. I want you to look at this. There are many swear words. That's why I did not turn the sound on. This is what a new truck that was supplied to the front line looks like. It's one of the Russian commercial vehicles called Bohanka. It's like a minivan. Not bad. I mean, it's usable. Obviously, the wheels are in really good shape. Mechanics out there, tell me, have you seen any anything like this before? Because to me, it kind of looks ins- insane. I don't know. I don't even know how to, you know, how to. What the hell? Well, it's good. I like it. I like it. If the condition of Russian army, it just actually proves what I said earlier. Um, Russians support Russian army, and they have regained trust in the Russian army. That's what makes me very sad. Um, they they're far from taking responsibility and repenting, but they this is what they've gained trust at. This is what is going on in the Russian army. Okay, and this is exactly what they're trusting. This fantastic, mighty, powerful army, number two in the world. They believe in it again. But it shows us that Russian army isn't moving anywhere. It's not pushing further into Ukraine with stuff like that. It can't. Now the next news is breaking. It's happening right now as I speak. It's a very bold crime in one of Russia's biggest cities, Kazan, one of the most advanced cities. Unknown assault. Uh, a convoy was of the federal penitentiary service was attacked, and they kidnapped a prisoner right out of prison's truck. An interception plan has been announced in Kazan right now, and the entire city, all the police force is up, and they're searching for those attackers. Um, this operation is being carried out as I speak. And this is how it happened. At the traffic light, a black Kia Rio, and that's a fairly small car, crashed into the official truck carrying the prisoner. And that truck is full of armed guards. So the attackers jumped out of Kia Rio. They got into the truck, penitentiary truck. They beat up the convoy and dragged out the prisoner who was being transported under guards. After that, the Kia took off and disappeared. Now, they beat up the armed guards who were barricaded inside the truck. Nice. Are there any, law enforcement out there watching me right now? Did you understand what perhaps I failed to describe it? A small Kia Rio smashes into an armed vehicle that carries a prisoner, convicted prisoner. Then a few attackers jump out, somehow get into this truck, beat up the armed guards armed with automatic weapons, with rifles, beat them up, grab the prisoner, drag him out, shove it into a Kia Rio, and take off, and no one can find them. Nice. Instead of watching the movie, why don't you watch something like that? Real life stuff happens in Kazan. Now, I've picked this news because I think one thing to notice here is, not the assault itself, not the attack. It's just the boldness. Things like that never happened in Russia. Armed attackers kidnapped a prisoner being transported from a guard specialized van full of armed guards. Can you smell something fishy here? Perhaps masked military personnel with extended experience of fighting in a war or in special operations jumped out of that Kia Rio. Perhaps the whole operation was well planned. Anyone? Am I the only one think so? Mark my words. There is a huge crime wave, not just coming to Russia, but is already in Russia. And the federal police will be useless against armed former soldiers, just like they were absolutely useless in Kazan a few minutes ago. That's another huge problem Russia is facing right now. And by the way, there will be many more news like that. And if you want to keep up with other breaking news from Russia, consider becoming patron of Inside Russia. Every single day, I carefully select and post 9 news that I find important with my commentaries and analysis on Patreon. I'll keep you informed on everything you wanted to know about Russia. Now you know where to ask. So consider becoming Patreon. I'm going to place the links in the description to this video and in the pinned comment. Okay, and get the news that matter. That most likely, most of those news you will not find anywhere else. Please check it out. Now, the next piece of news is very, emotional. Again, it's nothing unexpected. And this is about drone attacks. Just like the arrests, this is now a permanent feature of Friday or weekend news reports. Sometimes I release this report on Friday if I have time to finish it up by Friday, because it takes a very long time. Or sometimes I release it on Saturday or Sunday. So anyway, drone attacks. 2 Moscow airports, Domodedovo and Zhukovsky, suspended the operations 4 times this week. And this is the very heart of Russia, Moscow, a place extremely guarded. There have been large number of drone attacks all over Russia every single day, in hundreds. Now, that's what is happening. One attack happened south of Rostov-on-Don, the city where I used to live, in the town of Bataisk, and I would like to show you some footage of that. But as usual, I place the videos of some attacks into Telegram channel of Inside Russia, because YouTube would ban me for explicit videos, just go and check it out in Telegram. And I'm thinking of, I'll definitely do that. I show you a few videos here on this channel, but I'm going to posting these videos into the Telegram channel of Inside Russia. So you have access not just to the drone attacks and other stuff, but to everything that you find here. So I'm going to place the links again in pinned comment and in the description to this video. It's actually already there. Now, I will place the videos right after I am finished with this live stream. So give it a few minutes and come see the attacks in Bataisk and other footage that I have. The next news is pretty funny. Yeah, that's the right word. Perhaps a bit tragic. I don't know. Well, you decide. Makhachkala. It's the biggest city of Dagestan. the Caucasus region of Russia in the south, right next to Georgia, not too far from Iran, in the south. An ambulance driver and a doctor in the ambulance were fined for driving and riding without seatbelt, well, unfastened seatbelt. They responded to a call. They showed up, and there was a fella having a heart attack. So they grabbed that man and put him into the ambulance, jumped into the ambulance, and were rushing the patient to a hospital. Heart attack is a big deal. You gotta be fast. Now, the automatic traffic video camera recorded them driving and riding unfastened. And a fine was given to both men, $20 each. What happened to the unfortunate fella who was having a heart attack at the time is unknown. I hope the ambulance didn't stop by a bank on the way to the hospital so the man could pay the fines. I hope that the man survived, but then we don't know that. Now, this news shows us poor current state of Russian economy. It's so poor that Putin needs money so bad. They fine even ambulance drivers and doctors responding to heart attacks. The state is trying to put its greasy, hairy hand deeper and deeper into the pockets of Russian people. And now it becomes absurdity. Things are pretty bad. I've been telling you about the economic tsunami. By the way, every Wednesday, I have the economic review of previous week of biggest economic news. And that's basically, I can rename it into the Chronicles of the Demise of Russian Economy, something like that. And that's one of the news, actually. It's like a showcase. Now, before we move to the last news, and the last news is I'm going to shock you. Okay, there are 50, 100 people watching me right now, and you're going to be. This is you can't find what I'm going to tell you anywhere online. Certainly not in the Western media, not in the Russian media. I stumbled upon this information accidentally. Now, before I move to that, I'd like to ask you a favor. As usual, closer to the end of this live streams every Friday, I am asking you to let me know what you think of this news selection. Please write down below in the comments. Pick three news and let me know which ones you like the most. Perhaps you didn't like something, also let me know. And if you haven't liked, please like this message right now. Thank you very much. There are 50, 100 people watching and only 22,500 likes. So, like it right now as I'm sipping this wonderful English breakfast tea. Not as hot any longer, but it's by the Twinings. I like it very much. I'm not sponsored by Twinings. I like this tea. Also like Taylor's at Harrogate. So English people, thank you very much for your wonderful tea. Cheers. There have been few likes, but not many. That's okay. I tried. Now, I appreciate your support, your liking, your watching very much. Thank you for coming. The last but not least, the most important news of this week, and I think it's one of the most important news of the summer. Winter and the fall. The energy crisis. Gas and diesel fuel shortages are all over Russia right now, and they're spreading, right? Is that the what I'm going to be talking about? What do you think, right? No. No. Forget about gas shortages. That's not a big deal compared to what's coming. The electricity crisis. You see, Russians can live with fuel shortages. If worst comes to worst, they'll park their cars and start walking. They use bicycles, they carpool, they will stay home, or they will use buses, whatever will be left of buses, but there will be some. They will manage to move, you know. Russians can live with high food prices. It simply means that they will grow their own food and they will eat less, but they will not die. They will not, be. It's not the worst thing can happen to them. They can't live without heat, electricity, and water. Well, electricity, really, because everything else depends on electricity, including heat and water. No, I've been telling of a massive utility crisis on the horizon. For the past, there was a pretty bad situation in early months of 2023. Tons of utilities breakdowns. 2024 was more or less quiet on the utilities front because Russia enjoyed very mild winter, unseasonably warm. Now, what I've been saying is, look, there is a cumulative problem. Okay, the things need to be maintained. Power plants are very complicated facilities with complicated machinery. You got to have people, you got to have money, you got to have spare parts, and you got to have people who know the technology, that engineers of from the manufacturers, right? No, and I've been saying that okay, there are problems coming on the horizon. No people, a lot of technicians can be found at the front lines, dead or alive, but not at the power plants. Irregular maintenance works, lack of spare parts, and service engineers for foreign made equipment such as gas or steam turbines, um, exciters, gas compressors, just to name a few reasons. And this is going to be winter number four. All the reserves have been used up. The people, the spare parts, everything they could throw into the power plants and generally into the utilities they have. And now I give you hard facts, something that is not coming, not around the corner, something that is happening right now. Rostov on Don, the city where I was born and grew up in, scheduled electricity blackouts in the northern part of the city near Timernitsky and in the southern part of the city in Bataysk. The north, as it turns out, has been suffering for quite some time already, and the south just had its first scheduled blackout 2 days ago. In Volgograd, another 1 million people city, scheduled power blackouts started some time ago. I want to show you this picture right here. Scheduled power outages on October 23rd in Volgograd will again affect residents for about 15 streets and 4 districts. We're talking about tens of thousands of people. Power outages are due to maintenance and repair work on Thursday, while not widespread, are experienced to be quite prolonged. They are expected in Dzerzhinsky, Sovietsky, Kirovsky, and Krasnoarmelsky districts. And then they give you the number of apartment blocks. And each apartment block consists of hundreds of apartments. And the list goes on. Take a closer look at this. Another large city called Bisk. That's a completely different part of Russia. On October 24th, power in Bisk will be cut off. Planned power outages in Bisk. Remember this word, planned. This is the key. As a reminder, today, and this is a local media, as a reminder, today, October 24th, power will be out at several addresses in Bisk. The city administration previously announced the planned outages. Quite a few streets, and look at this list. Now we move to another city, and this is Ryazan, the city near Moscow, a large city, one of the major cities. Now they saying this is an emergency, not planned. Ryazan residents are without power. 12 Ryazan streets were left without power. The city's power grid reported that emergency power outages had occurred in the city. Power is out on several streets. What are those streets? How many of them? 12. This is Ryazan, a large city near Moscow. Now, let's move. It gets more interesting. This is Stavropol. Once again, more than 2 dozen towns and villages will be left without power in Stavropol. 2 dozen towns and villages. October 24th. The residents of 26 settlements, big and small, will be temporarily without power due to scheduled maintenance work. And then the names of these settlements: Abram Tube, Alexandrovskaya, Artsgir, Grigorievsk, Georgievskaya, Civil, Rokeri, Wonderful, Yesentuki, Zaterechny, Zolskaya. I think Wonderful is прекрасная. Okay, that's just translation in English. Ipatova, Kursk, Летняя, Минеральные воды, Михайловск, Невинномысск, that's not gentle, that's a translation into English. It's мягкий, perhaps, Novopavlovsk, Petigorsk, Stavropol. Stavropol is the capital. Look how many addresses are affected in Stavropol. It's the capital of the province. It's the largest city. Stodеревская, Kherson. Wow. Just wow. And you know what, friends? The list goes on. Irkutsk, big blackouts. Krasnodar, big blackouts. The Irkutsk is far east. Krasnodar is the south. Crimea, and many other towns, cities, and villages are experiencing power outages. This is a full blown crisis. This is not around the corner somewhere. This is it. Now, a couple things I want everyone to understand about this. Caught me by surprise. I mean, I spent 20 years in Russia building power plants, HV lines, and big substations. 110 kV, 220 kV, 500 kV, was 550. Um, GIS, open air switchgear. Um, I worked with GE, I worked with Siemens, I worked with Arriva, I worked with Alstom, you name it. In this, I didn't know what was happening in Russia. Now, if you tune in to Russian media right now in Russia, you will not find anything on this topic. Silence, complete silence. They report what I just showed you only in local news. And this is where I dug it from. The reason uh, they give in most places, except for one says it's an emergency outage. But the reason they give is scheduled maintenance. Now, that is lie. That is bullcrap. You don't maintain electricity and heat power plants in Russia in late October. It's done in July and August. There is actually maintenance schedule, and it's done in the summer months. Now, why? Because this is weather in Bisk right now. It's Celsius. 1 degree feels like -4. And this is the same in Fahrenheit. 34 feels like 25. And this is the weather in Irkutsk. In Celsius, -4 feels like -10. And this is in Fahrenheit. 25 feels like 14. Now, you tell me, even in the south, it's cold. And the power plants operate, well, they should be operating near full capacity. You tell me, do they maintain shut off power plants so they don't generate, the turbines stop spinning and they don't generate both electricity and heat in the weather like this? Because most Russian apartment blocks have had central heating. Do they do that in the weather like this? In Bisk, in the weather like this? Even in Rostov and Krasnodar, Russia's most southern cities, big cities, it's cold. It's in the 40s. At this time, everything all over Russia should be maintained and serviced. And there are government agencies that watch over power plants exactly for this. So everything is maintained properly in time. Okay? Wow. So the reason I started looking into outages is because I was notified that there was outage in Rostov on Don. Now, I have a lot of people I know in Rostov, and on two separate occasions, some people live in the south and some people live in the north. And I decided to dig into the news a little bit. And what I found in the local news is really crazy. This is it. This is happening. The government keeps silent because it has nothing to say. It cannot, some kind of bogus excuse they give saying that's a scheduled maintenance everywhere except for, I think, Ryazan, except for one city. They say, well, it's an emergency. Now, I heard the same thing about Belgorod and many other cities in Russia. Wow, just wow. Now, let me finish this live stream with a personal story about the outages. Something happened when I was growing up. I think I was about 12 or 13 years old. It was um, the late 80s. And in Russia, the USSR was falling apart pretty much in the same way, well, in a similar way that Russia starts falling apart right now. The USSR was well into this collapse. Now, I think it was 89. Utilities stopped functioning well. For the same reason, there was not enough maintenance. There were not enough, well, people were enough, but there were not enough parts, and all the equipment was Soviet made and it broke down all the time. And I still remember one episode from my childhood very well. It's very vivid. No, vivid. I'm sorry. Very vivid. We didn't have electricity and water for 5 days. And, you can go without water and without electricity for a day, max. And after one day it becomes really, really terrible. Water is the killer because you need to cook, you need to drink, and you need to go to toilet. And you cannot do that when you don't have water. So day number two, everyone started, and I remember all of a sudden you just don't have water. Okay, and in Russia, in the Soviet Union back then, you couldn't just go to a store and buy water because they didn't sell water. The only water came from faucet. Um, you really become miserable. And then electricity. We didn't have computers back then. We didn't have gadgets, nothing except for TV sets. And even with that, it was terrible, absolutely terrible. Everyone just got out on the street and was hanging out on streets because there was nothing else, nothing to do in home. But I remember this despair on day number 3 and 4. The government, some kind of like services, started bringing us water in large yellow barrels, huge barrels. They usually sold beer in barrels like that. So I basically they and a kvass, that's a like Russian type of moxie drink. They basically stopped brewing beer and they stopped selling it, and they took all the barrels, and it was, you could tow it behind the truck. They could find all these machines that could hold water, and they filled it up with water someplace, and they brought to different no, near apartment blocks, and everyone just knew that water arrived at that house, an apartment block, and that apartment block. And I remember I had a bucket, a big bucket, vedro, and I ran to get water. And I remember that feeling, friends. Gosh, it's really hard to explain, but imagine me being 13 years old and still remembering that stuff. And that was summer, by the way. It was warm. Um, this is what's coming, and I think worse, because in Rostov, where I was growing up in the northern part of the city, it was just a lifetime occasion. But what's happening in Russia? It's like a domino effect. Everything starts falling. Now, I calculated this crisis. Okay, um, I started looking for signs of this crisis coming because I knew it was coming. But I found, what I dug out is a full blown crisis happening right now. And this is just October. Friends, Russia has very long winter, and it's not going to get any warmer, and it's not going to get any better. Holy moly. That's all I have to say. Um, well, the situation is becoming really eventful. We're going to be seeing a lot of developments. And I am more convinced than ever this is the final chapter of Putin's regime. Something's got to change soon. So thank you very much for watching. Carthago delenda est. Don't forget about the Patreon.